So I'm Tyler Mathews. I'm the Executive Director of Venture Cafe St. Louis. So I run Venture Cafe St. Louis with a small team, and also Innovation Hall, which is part of Venture Cafe, but a new project we're launching later in 2018. So I think Venture Cafe is, we started off with the Thursday gatherings, and really that was, I guess I don't know if we thought about it this way, but we really were disrupting how like networking and community building was being done. I think everyone kind of had this like gross feeling of what networking was like, because it was, you know, you thought about people and, or at least for me, I thought about people in suits and just really kind of looking out for themselves, trying to make a quick sale, and it was kind of superficial. And so I had gone to a few different entrepreneurial networking events that just didn't really feel like I belonged there. And I think what Venture Cafe does really well is it focuses more on the community building and relationship side first. It looks like a lot of fun to the outsider, kind of like, you know, what are you doing for the community? Because like, you know, there's some free drinks, you know, everyone's kind of having a good time, but it's very intentionally casual because we find that when people let their guard down and your name tag doesn't say VP or whatever, it allows people to interact and just be more of their true self. And we find that when people do that, they are able to share these crazy ideas that they have without the fear of being, you know, looked at as like a dummy or that the idea is crazy, because we've created this environment where people feel like, yeah, they can share their crazy ideas out loud, and people can give feedback or listen, but it's not really a scenario where you have to put on this facade of I'm a professional and here I've got it all together. So, you know, we actually don't even, we tell people there's like 3 simple rules. It's like, don't sell, don't drink too much, and, you know, just be kind to everyone else, like you would want to be treated as well. And so that environment has allowed people to, I think, come up with, you know, pursue their ideas in an environment where they normally wouldn't be able to pursue them. So I think what guides my work, whether it's Venture Cafe or anything in general, is I'm just attracted to, I think, the idea of people being in more of a team environment, and also the idea of people having ownership and responsibility for what they do, no matter really what the role is. And I think, you know, part of that approach is because we're a small team and we do a lot. So it's kind of like when you come on board, you kind of just like, here it is, get to work. But also what I've seen is that it does a lot of good, because if people have a lot of ownership over what they do, and that allows them to take responsibility and feel like, and they, you know, the freedom to make decisions for themselves instead of having to be this thing where they are continually looking for, you know, approval for things that they know, right? We hire people because like they're pros at what they do. And so it's like, let them do that. And I think what's nice about Venture Cafe and in general is that people are all in this very like, they're all on the same level, really. I mean, you can have the GM of Microsoft there and then a brand new up and coming entrepreneur. But the thing is that in that environment, everyone's kind of like all there for the same purpose, which is to help make St. Louis a better place and to help entrepreneurs be better at what they do. And the great thing about entrepreneurship that I love is that everyone is kind of coming in knowing that they don't know everything. And so if you are an executive from a company and now you're jumping into entrepreneurship, you're basically almost, you know, you've got that experience, but you don't know the other side of it. It's still a very different, it's not a smaller company, it's something totally different, right? And I think that environment of being willing to fail, being willing to just create thought experiments, thinking of all of your projects like that, is something that I'm really attracted to, because I think it helps make better companies and better people. And so that's, you know, that's the environment I hopefully am creating with Venture Cafe. So I guess I don't really have this like dramatic personal like story that drove me to this place where I'm at right now. But one thing I did I think the one thing that was kind of like this, burden I carried with me for a long time was like imposter syndrome. And so, I knew I was like a smart person, but I always felt like I had to prove things, and that because I wasn't like some of my other friends who grew up in this traditional environment of, their parents are there instilling these business values into them, and then they immediately go to a really nice college and get a good degree, and then they jump into like, insurance or banking. I didn't have that pathway, and so for me, I was kind of always trying to like prove that I knew what I was doing, and I really was bad at proving to myself that I knew what I was doing. So I was constantly battling that, and I was fortunate enough to be able to have to get a scholarship for school and eventually even to get my MBA. But really, if I probably would have still tried to figure out how to get my MBA, even if I didn't have the financial opportunity, because I was always trying to figure out like, okay, I graduated, but I still need to prove myself. So now I'm gonna go to the next thing. And then I got my MBA, and it's like, oh, but I still have to prove myself. And I was constantly always struggling with this, I don't know, I'm not as good as the next person. And that really held me up forever. I mean, I had like side projects I never completed because I never wanted to show the work I was doing, because I was afraid of like, oh, this isn't as good as I was hoping it to be, or it's not as good as my friends' projects. But really, it was just like, I had this like thought that was kind of just like this small little voice was like, why don't you just finish one project? Like, who cares? Just get it done. And I did it, and it was this tiniest little project. But like completing one thing was like this cognitive like, really it freed me up a lot. And so I did one, and then I was like, oh, well, that wasn't so bad. Like, why don't I try the next one? And so they got bigger every time, because I just kind of built confidence after each project was completed. And really, eventually that led me to doing my first startup. And that was an amazing experience. It really rivaled my traditional education. And that's where I really built the confidence up, because I had people around me who, I guess, they trusted me and respected my input on things. And so that really that's where my confidence got built up. My wife was always telling me things, but you sometimes like discount the people who know best because they're so close to you. And so all the things that she was telling me were the things that I was getting validated from people in the community. And so I can't stress enough how important it is to, one, know that you have an expertise in an area that no one else has, but you just have to discover what that is. And the only way to discover what that is to do it. And so if you're not experimenting, and I think that word experiment is really powerful too, because if you're like, oh, well, I'm just doing an experiment, and a lot like frees you up mentally to think like, oh, if it fails, it was an experiment. And if you can just complete one, and even if it's like garbage, like that's really important, just to complete it. And then be like, okay, next one will be better, next one will be bigger. And you can also build experience that way. So I was like, there's things I wanted to be better at even in my day job. And I didn't have the environment to do it, but these side projects allowed me to do those things. I ran a virtual team, even though it was small, and I did all these other things that I was like, oh, well, yeah, this is actually good work-life experience. And so I just started becoming more confident about who I was professionally. And then once I got used and over the idea of failure and the idea of like showing my work to the public, then it kind of just opened the doors for everything else. It just didn't really matter. But I think, experimenting, completing stuff, just doing stuff it should not be perfect, right? Like your first project or your second project, whatever. Just get it out there. And I think those are really valuable things to know, and will help you just continue to build confidence. So yeah, being a disruptor, that's a term that gets thrown around a lot in the startup world. And originally, I think the term started getting used a lot, I guess, because it was ideas that were coming into the market or into an industry that just were not being thought of at all. Like, I think innovation typically catches you off guard because it's not what you're expecting. Innovation isn't these incremental improvements. It's like something brand new. So, everyone uses this example, but like Airbnb, right? That's disruptive. It wasn't a new hotel model. It was something completely different. I think for individuals, there's a spectrum of that. So there's these new ideas that people discredit and think are crazy, and that's generally when you probably have a good idea, is if everyone thinks it's crazy. But But then there's, that's one end of it. And then there's the other end, I think, too, is just like people continually to make these incremental improvements in areas that no one else is thinking about, or pain points that aren't being solved. But it really requires, and I mean this in the best way, like crazy people. Entrepreneurs are kind of crazy. Like, why would you leave your good gig to be an entrepreneur where like you're constantly doubting, is this the right move? Am I even good at what I do? Putting all this risk into things. But I think entrepreneurs are just generally disruptive people because they're like, I want to do the thing I love to do. And I think that's also a disruptive idea because everyone thinks that they have to go down this pathway, and entrepreneurs are kind of like, I can't do that. I have to do what I'm passionate about. And I think, and they're also looking at the world differently. They're looking at problems that aren't being addressed. And I think that is largely a form of disruption. I'm Tyler Mathews, and I am a dreamer and a disruptor.